On a frozen mountain road deep in the Blue Ridge, a Navy SEAL slowed his truck when his K9 suddenly stiffened. Snow swallowed the world ahead, the wind tearing through the trees like a warning. Then he saw them. An elderly woman barely standing, a young woman holding her upright, a tiny puppy wrapped in a worn blanket, pressed tight against the old woman's chest. They weren't asking for help. They weren't waving anyone down. They were just walking, step after step, as if stopping wasn't an option anymore. The SEAL sat there for a moment, memories of his own grandmother tightening his chest. Then he opened the door, stepped into the storm, and said quietly, "What's going on out here? You can't be walking in this." Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, hit subscribe so you never miss another story of loyalty, courage, and heart. Your support truly means the world. Winter lay heavy over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Pine trees stood silent beneath thick snow, and a narrow mountain road cut through the forest like a pale scar, swallowed slowly by fading light. Evan Cole drove alone. The truck's engine hummed low, steady, the sound carrying farther than it should in the stillness. Snow packed tight beneath the tires, crunching rhythmically as he followed the winding road deeper into the mountains. There was no radio playing. He hadn't turned it on since leaving the highway. Silence felt easier. He was 36 years old, tall and powerfully built, his broad shoulders filling the driver's seat. Years of service had shaped him into someone who moved with control even when sitting still. His face was angular, masculine, marked by a strong jaw and high cheekbones. A short, neatly trimmed beard darkened his face, hiding the fatigue beneath it. His eyes stayed alert, scanning the road ahead with a habit he could never quite turn off. Beside him sat Atlas. The German Shepherd was 7, black and tan, thick-coated and calm. Atlas lay upright, posture disciplined but relaxed, amber eyes tracking the tree line. Snow clung lightly to his fur where it brushed the open window earlier. He was not restless. He never was. Atlas had learned long ago when to be still. Evan had finished an overseas mission weeks earlier. It had ended the way most of them did, quietly. No celebration, no sense of closure, just the slow return to a world that had kept moving without him. What pulled him back into these mountains wasn't memory. At least that was what he told himself. It was paperwork. A legal notice had arrived while he was still stateside. If he didn't return to handle the estate, the cabin would be forfeited, sold off, lost to someone else. The words were impersonal, printed cleanly on white paper, but they carried weight all the same. The cabin had belonged to his grandmother. His parents had died when he was young, too young to understand what was taken from him. After that, it was his grandmother who raised him. She had lived in that cabin alone, high in the mountains, through winters harsher than this one. She taught him how to endure without complaint, how to respect silence, how to keep moving when the world narrowed. She died 5 years ago. Evan hadn't been back since. Some places demanded too much. This trip wasn't about healing. He framed it carefully in his mind. He would drive in, sign what needed signing, secure the property, and leave. He wouldn't stay long enough for memories to settle in his bones. That was the plan. Atlas shifted. Not suddenly, not anxiously, just enough to draw Evan's attention. Evan felt it before he consciously registered it. The subtle change in his partner's focus. Atlas's ears angled forward. His breathing changed. Evan eased his foot off the accelerator. "What do you have, buddy?" he murmured. Atlas leaned forward slightly, nose lifting, testing the air. Human scent. And something smaller. Evan's grip tightened on the wheel as his eyes cut through the thinning light. The forest opened briefly along the road, revealing movement where there should have been none. 2 figures stood ahead. A younger woman, wrapped in a worn coat, posture tense as if bracing against more than the cold. Beside her, an elderly woman, shoulders bent, clutching a small bundle close to her chest. Even from a distance, Evan could tell she was holding something alive. A puppy. They were standing still now, but their tracks told the story. footsteps trailing behind them, already half buried by falling snow. Evan slowed further. Every instinct drilled into him over years of service whispered caution. Unknown civilians. Isolated road. Dusk closing in. Help could turn into liability fast. He had learned that lesson the hard way. He should keep driving. The thought came quickly, almost automatically. Then the older woman shifted, lifting her head slightly. Snow clung to her hair, silver strands catching the dim light. She looked small against the trees, fragile, but she didn't move from where she stood. The image struck deeper than Evan expected. His grandmother standing in the doorway of the cabin during winter storms flashed through his mind. The way she watched the road, waiting. The way she spoke about cold as if it were a living thing that had to be respected. "No one belongs outside when the cold sets in," she had said once, as plainly as if she were talking about the weather. Evan exhaled slowly. He guided the truck onto the shoulder and brought it to a stop. The engine idled, a low vibration beneath his boots. For a moment he stayed seated, eyes fixed ahead. The younger woman noticed the truck then, stiffening. The older woman only tightened her hold on the small shape in her arms. Evan opened the door. Cold rushed in immediately, sharp and unforgiving. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he stepped down onto the road. Atlas followed without command, moving into position at Evan's side, body calm, head high. Not aggressive, just present. Evan closed the door behind him. He took one step forward, then another. The forest remained silent as he began walking toward them, the distance closing slowly, deliberately, with Atlas keeping pace at his side. The cold didn't ease when Evan stepped closer. It pressed in harder, as if the mountains themselves were testing the moment. The elderly woman tightened her arms around the bundle she was holding. Her hands were thin, veins raised beneath pale skin, fingers trembling despite the blanket wrapped around the puppy. She looked to be around 70, small in stature, her frame narrowed by age and hardship. Deep lines crossed her face, not harsh but worn soft by time. Her silver hair was uncovered, brushed back loosely, already catching flecks of snow. Her eyes, a faded blue, struggled to hold focus. "This wind," she murmured, voice drifting. "It wasn't like this a moment ago." The younger woman moved instinctively, stepping half a pace closer to shield her. She was in her early 30s, Evan guessed, slim and underweight from exhaustion rather than build. Her face was drawn, cheekbones pronounced, skin pale and reddened by cold. Dark brown hair was pulled back in a low, uneven tie, strands loose against her cheeks. Her eyes were sharp and alert, scanning Evan, Atlas, the truck, the road behind them. Protective, tired, still standing. "I've got you, Mom," she said quietly, one arm firm around the older woman's shoulders. Evan stopped several feet away, close enough to help, far enough not to threaten. Atlas moved first. The German shepherd stepped forward with deliberate calm, head lowered slightly, body loose. He sniffed the air once, then angled toward the small bundle in the elderly woman's arms. Evan watched every muscle, ready to intervene if needed, but Atlas's movement stayed controlled. The puppy whimpered softly. Atlas paused, then slowly sat down in the snow. A clear signal. No danger. The puppy was tiny, 4, maybe 6 weeks old at most. Black and tan fur matted slightly with melted snow, ribs faintly visible beneath its coat. Its eyes fluttered, barely open, and its small body shook with each shallow breath. "Easy," Evan said, voice low. "He's not going to hurt him." The elderly woman looked down at Atlas, then back at Evan, confusion crossing her face. "He's cold," she said. "He doesn't stop shaking." "I know," Evan replied. The younger woman nodded once, jaw tight. "His name's Ash." She shifted the blanket just enough to tuck it closer around the puppy. Ash let out a small sound and pressed deeper into the warmth of her mother's chest. "I'm Evan," he said. "This is Atlas." The younger woman hesitated, then answered. "Lena, and this is my mom, Maggie." Maggie smiled faintly at the sound of her name, then frowned. We were supposed to get somewhere warm, she said. I think. Lena swallowed. We didn't make it. The wind picked up, cutting through Evan's uniform. Snow creaked underfoot as Atlas shifted his weight, positioning himself between Maggie and the open road, blocking the worst of the wind without crowding her. How long have you been out here? Evan asked. Lena shook her head. Too long. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. Evan noticed the way her fingers flexed unconsciously, fighting numbness. There's no place nearby, she continued. We tried to keep moving, but... She glanced down at Maggie, then at Ash. We can't walk much farther. Maggie nodded, suddenly anxious. Ash needs to eat, she said. Has he eaten? Lena answered gently. He did. Just a little. Oh. Maggie relaxed. Good. Atlas leaned forward slightly, nose twitching as he caught Ash's scent again. The puppy stirred, then went still, as if the larger dog's presence steadied him. Evan felt the weight settle fully in his chest now. This wasn't inconvenience. This wasn't a choice that could be delayed. You can't stay out here, he said. Not in this weather. Lena looked up at him fully for the first time. Fear flickered there, quickly masked by resolve. We're not asking for anything. I know, Evan said. Snow continued to fall, slow and heavy now, the sky dimming as evening crept closer. Evan glanced once at the road behind him, then back at Maggie's shaking hands and the fragile rise and fall of Ash's chest. He thought of the cabin, cold, empty, waiting. Come on, he said, stepping aside and opening the truck door wider. Let's get you out of this. Lena hesitated only a second. That was enough. The clinic sat just off the mountain road, a squat one-story building with faded siding and a single light buzzing above the door. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, sharp but reassuring after the cold. Evan guided Maggie through the entrance while Lena followed, clutching Ash close to her chest. Atlas stepped in last and immediately lay down beside the door, body angled outward, ears relaxed but alert. He didn't need a command. Guarding thresholds was muscle memory. A nurse appeared from behind the counter. She was in her mid-40s, average height, with sandy blonde hair pulled into a practical bun. Her face carried the calm of someone used to emergencies that never made headlines. The name on her badge read Nora. Let's get you warm, Nora said gently, already reaching for blankets. Her eyes flicked briefly to Atlas, then back to Evan without alarm. Dogs trained? Yes, ma'am, Evan replied. Figured. Maggie was led to an exam room. She moved slowly, gaze drifting, fingers tightening around Ash as if afraid he might vanish. The puppy trembled, tiny chest fluttering against her coat. The doctor entered moments later. Dr. Samuel Price was a thin man in his late 50s with wire-frame glasses and graying hair combed carefully to one side. His movements were unhurried, voice even, the kind that didn't rush bad news or good. Evening, he said, washing his hands. What brings you in? Maggie looked up, eyes uncertain. Am I late? She asked. I don't want to miss it. Lena's jaw tightened. No, Mom, you're fine. Dr. Price smiled kindly. We'll take it one step at a time. As he checked Maggie's vitals, she asked the same questions twice. Where she was, whether it was snowing outside, if Ash had eaten. Each time, Lena answered patiently, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing her shoulders down. Evan watched from the corner, arms crossed loosely, noting the way Lena never corrected her mother sharply, never showed frustration. Ash was placed on a warming pad nearby. The puppy let out a small squeak when the heat reached him, then relaxed enough to stretch one tiny paw. Nora laughed softly. Well, look at that, she said. He's got opinions. Ash promptly yawned, pink tongue flashing, then fell asleep again. Even Evan felt the tension ease a notch. Atlas lifted his head at the sound, eyes following the movement, then settled again, still ready. While Dr. Price finished with Maggie, Nora motioned Evan and Lena aside. She's hypothermic but mild, she said. Dehydrated. Nothing we can't manage tonight. And the puppy? Lena asked. Cold, underfed, but he's a fighter. Nora smiled. He'll be fine if kept warm. Lena exhaled shakily, relief softening her posture for the first time. They moved to the waiting area while Maggie rested. Snow tapped lightly against the windows, the world outside muted and distant. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Then Lena did. "My husband works construction," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. "When he's working." Evan didn't interrupt. "He drinks, gambles." Her hands twisted together. "Says we're a burden, that my mom's a problem I should have solved years ago." She paused, swallowing. "He wanted me to put her in a nursing home, said it was cheaper than keeping us." "And you didn't," Evan said. "No." Her voice hardened. "I couldn't." She told him about the fight, the shouting, how her husband had given an ultimatum, leave Maggie behind or leave the house, how she'd packed what she could and walked out with her mother into the night. "We didn't have much money left," she added. "I thought we could make it to somewhere safer. I was wrong." Evan nodded once. No judgment, just understanding. Dr. Price returned later, expression serious but calm. "I can keep her here overnight if needed," he said, nodding toward Maggie. "But after tonight, she'll need a stable place, warm, quiet." Evan looked through the window at Maggie, who was gently stroking Ash's fur as if counting the seconds. "I've got a cabin," he said slowly, "not far from here." Lena looked up, startled. "It's empty," he continued. "Needs heat, but it's solid." The clinic couldn't solve everything. It never did. It could only get people through the worst part. Evan understood that now. The cabin appeared between the pines like a memory Evan hadn't finished remembering. Snow lay heavy on the roof and porch rail, the clearing untouched except for his tire tracks. No lights, no smoke, just the quiet weight of winter holding everything still. Evan cut the engine and listened. The sudden silence pressed against his ears, the kind that always came after long deployments when the noise stopped but the body didn't believe it yet. Atlas jumped down first, boots crunching in the snow behind him, the dog's posture alert but unhurried. Lena helped Maggie out carefully, one arm around her mother's shoulders, the other cradling Ash beneath her coat. The front door resisted at first. The wood had swollen with years of cold and neglect. Evan leaned into it, shoulder firm, and the lock finally gave with a dull crack. Cold air spilled out, sharp and stale, carrying the smell of dust, old pine, and something faintly familiar he couldn't name. Inside, the cabin was dim and gray. Frost edged the windows. A thin layer of dust coated every surface undisturbed for years. The furniture sat exactly where it had been left, as if the house itself had been waiting. "I'll get the fire," Evan said quietly. He moved through the space with instinct more than memory, stacking logs, striking a match. The flame caught slowly, then climbed, the sound of it settling into the stone hearth like a long exhale. Warmth crept back into the room inch by inch. Maggie stood just inside the doorway, eyes roaming. Her expression shifted, confusion giving way to something softer, older. She stepped forward without being told, her movements careful but purposeful, as if following a path she didn't fully see anymore. Lena noticed it too. "Mom?" Maggie didn't answer. She crossed the room and stopped in the corner, where a large wooden frame stood partially draped in cloth, a loom. Old, hand-built, its wood was darkened with age, smooth where hands had touched it again and again. Maggie reached out. Her fingers found the beam with quiet certainty. She traced the edge, then rested her palm against it, eyes closing briefly as if listening for something beneath the silence. Evan froze. A memory surfaced, uninvited and clear. His grandmother standing by the window on a winter afternoon, snow drifting past the glass, her voice calm as weather. "Ba hoc dead tu me min. Ngui Cherokee, trong vong ne I kung lam ve hoi chuk." The thought settled, then passed. He didn't explain it. He didn't need to. Maggie opened her eyes. "It's cold," she said, then smiled faintly. "But it's still here." Ash stirred, making a small sound. Maggie sat by the fire and pulled the puppy into her lap, wrapping the blanket tighter around him. Within minutes, Ash's shaking eased, his tiny body rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He slept, nose tucked against Maggie's coat, as if he'd always belonged there. Atlas circled the room once, checking corners, sniffing the baseboards and door frames. Satisfied, he lay down near the hearth, positioning himself so he could see both the entrance and the people by the fire. Watchful. Calm. Lena set down the few bags they had and looked around, uncertainty written across her face. "We don't want to impose," she said softly. "We can—" "You're staying," Evan said, not unkindly. She met his eyes, searching for hesitation. There was none. As the fire grew stronger, the cabin changed. Shadows softened. The air warmed. Dust motes floated like slow snow in the light. Evan wiped down the table, swept the floor near the door, patched the draft along one window with an old cloth he found in a drawer. None of it felt like paperwork anymore. Maggie watched him work, eyes following each movement. "You know this place?" she said suddenly. "Yes," Evan replied. "I grew up here." She nodded, satisfied. A moment later she asked, "Is Ash warm?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Night settled outside, deep and blue. The wind pressed against the walls, but the cabin held. Evan sat back in a chair near the fire, muscles finally loosening. Across from him, Lena leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling her down in quiet waves now that the danger had passed. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. The loom stood in its corner, silent, waiting. The fire cracked and shifted. Atlas's breathing was steady. Ash slept without stirring. When Evan finally looked around the room, he realized the truth he'd been avoiding since he turned onto the mountain road. This place wasn't just a task to complete. For the first time in 5 years, Evan stayed the night. Morning arrived quietly, filtered through frost-edged windows and the soft crackle of embers still alive in the hearth. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and damp wool. Outside, the forest stood motionless, snow weighing every branch as if holding its breath. Evan was up before the light fully settled. He moved through the cold with practiced efficiency, shrugging into his jacket and stepping onto the porch. The roofline sagged slightly where winter had done its work. He climbed the ladder, hammer and nails in hand, breath fogging as he reinforced loose shingles. Each strike landed steady and controlled, the rhythm familiar. Work like this had always been easier than thinking. Inside, Lena set a pot on the stove. She moved carefully, conserving energy, her body still catching up after days of fear and walking. She was slim, shoulders narrow, but there was strength in the way she lifted and carried, in how she kept glancing toward the corner where her mother sat. Her dark hair was tied back again, neater now, as if routine itself was beginning to return. Maggie sat by the fire with Ash wrapped in a blanket on her lap. She hummed softly, the tune unrecognizable, maybe unfinished. Her face relaxed when the puppy stirred. "Has Ash eaten?" she asked, eyes fixed on him. "Yes, Mom," Lena answered gently. "He has." Maggie nodded, satisfied, then asked again a few minutes later. Ash had found his legs overnight, unsteady but determined. He toddled across the floor toward Atlas, who lay near the doorway like a carved figure brought briefly to life. The K9 lifted his head, watching the puppy approach with calm curiosity. Ash sniffed Atlas's paw. Atlas did not move. Encouraged, Ash leaned closer, then collapsed into a clumsy sprawl against Atlas's chest. The larger dog exhaled, shifted slightly, and allowed the contact. No warning, no correction, just patience. Evan noticed it from the porch window and paused. Something in his chest loosened. By midday, the cabin sounded different. The scrape of a broom against wood, the steady thud of an axe splitting logs, the soft clatter of dishes being washed in a basin. None of it was loud. All of it mattered. Evan stacked firewood along the wall, hands roughened by cold and labor. His face, angular and weathered by years outdoors, carried the calm focus of someone who had learned to keep moving no matter what followed him. The neatly trimmed beard along his jaw hid old scars of fatigue more than injury. He worked without speaking, not out of distance but because silence fit the moment. Lena hung damp clothes near the hearth, steam rising as they dried. "You don't have to do all this," she said quietly. "I know," Evan replied, "still doing it." She nodded. No argument, gratitude, but not desperation. That afternoon, Maggie wandered to the window, peering out as if expecting someone. "He'll be back soon," she said. Lena stiffened, then softened again. "Maybe," she answered. Ash whimpered, and Maggie immediately returned to her chair. "He's cold," she said, pulling the blanket closer. "He's warm," Evan said. "He's safe." Maggie looked up at him, eyes searching. "You're kind," she said simply. The words landed harder than any thanks. Evening brought a deeper quiet. The fire burned stronger now, heat filling the cabin. Lena served a simple meal, soup thick with beans and potatoes, bread warmed on the stove. They ate slowly, sitting close, the dogs at their feet. Evan spoke once, telling a brief story about a winter training exercise years ago. No names, no heroics, just cold, exhaustion, and the importance of watching out for the person beside you. Lena listened without interrupting. Maggie smiled at the sound of his voice, though she didn't follow every word. Later, as the light faded, Ash curled against Atlas's side. The puppy's breathing synced with the older dog's, fast at first, then slowing. Atlas rested his chin protectively near Ash's back, eyes half closed but aware. Evan sat across the room, watching the fire and the way shadows moved across the walls. The cabin felt different now. Not fixed, not whole, but alive. No one spoke of plans. No one promised anything. They simply stayed. The loom waited where it always had, quiet and patient in the corner, its wood dulled by years of stillness. Evan approached it with a cloth and a small toolkit, moving slower than usual, as if the object itself deserved a certain respect. He wiped dust from the frame, revealing grooves worn smooth by hands long gone. One joint creaked when he tested it. He tightened a bolt, adjusted the tension bar, and replaced a frayed cord with twine he found in an old drawer. The work was simple, deliberate. Each small correction felt like restoring a sentence that had been left unfinished. Maggie watched from her chair near the fire. At first her gaze drifted, attention pulled toward Ash as the puppy shifted and sighed in his sleep. Then her eyes settled on the loom. Something in her posture changed. She leaned forward slightly, fingers curling in her lap. "That's not right," she said softly. Evan paused. "What isn't?" She pointed, not sharply but with certainty. "The thread. It's too loose." He followed her gesture, adjusted the warp a fraction. Maggie nodded once, satisfied. When Evan stepped back, she rose on her own and walked to the loom. Her steps were slow, cautious but unassisted. She rested her hands on the beam, fingers hovering for a moment as if asking permission. Then she began. At first, her hands shook. The shuttle wobbled as it passed through the threads. Her breathing caught, frustration flickering across her face. Lena moved instinctively, ready to help, but stopped herself when Maggie lifted a hand. "Give me a second," Maggie said. She tried again. The movement steadied. The shuttle slid through. The beater tapped gently, finding a rhythm that felt older than memory. Her hands stopped shaking. The loom answered her touch with a soft, familiar sound. Wood against wood, thread settling into place. Lena's breath hitched. She pulled out her phone without a word and began recording. Not Maggie's face, just her hands. The thread. The shuttle moving back and forth. Ash lay curled at Maggie's feet now, one tiny paw resting against the loom's leg, rising and falling with sleep. The room filled with the sound of work. Evan stood back, arms crossed loosely, watching. The noise of the loom pulled something loose inside him. A memory surfaced unbidden. His grandmother in this same room, winter light slanting through the window, the quiet clack of the loom marking time when nothing else could. He remembered sitting on the floor, counting the sounds. Remembered how the house never felt empty when the loom was speaking. Maggie didn't speak as she worked. She didn't need to. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breath evened out. Whatever names and dates slipped through her mind no longer mattered. Her hands knew exactly where to go. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Lena lowered the phone at last, eyes shining but steady. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Maggie didn't look up. "It's just thread," she replied. But Evan saw the change. The way the room felt fuller. The way the fire seemed to burn steadier. The way Atlas, stretched near the doorway, lifted his head and then settled again, calm and content. Evan returned to the loom briefly, tightening one last knot where Maggie indicated. Their movements overlapped easily. No instruction needed. When he stepped away, she continued without pause. That night, no one spoke much. The loom worked until the light faded completely, until Maggie's hands finally slowed and rested. Ash stirred, pressing closer to her leg. She smiled down at him, then at the cloth beginning to take shape. "It's warm," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Evan answered. The loom stood awake now, no longer a relic, but a presence. And in its steady rhythm, something inside the cabin shifted, from survival to continuity, from waiting to doing. It happened 3 days later, just after noon. The loom was silent for once. Snowmelt dripped steadily from the eaves, tapping against a metal bucket Evan had set outside. Inside, Lena was folding a finished piece of cloth on the table, her movements careful, almost reverent. Maggie sat by the fire with Ash asleep against her chest, breathing slow and even. Atlas lifted his head first, not barking, not tense, just alert. Then came the sound of tires on gravel. Evan was already on his feet when the knock hit the door, hard, impatient, carrying a kind of anger that didn't belong in the mountains. "I'll handle it," he said quietly. Lena's shoulders stiffened. She hadn't seen the man yet, but she knew the sound. Her face drained of color as recognition set in. Evan opened the door halfway. The man standing on the porch was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered but worn down by years of bad habits and worse choices. His jacket was thin for the cold, his jeans stained, his boots muddy. A scruff of unshaven beard clung to his jaw, and his eyes, sharp, restless, flicked past Evan into the cabin. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Travis?" His voice cut through the room like a blade. Maggie startled at the sound and clutched Ash tighter. Her eyes widened, fear replacing confusion in an instant. "Lena," she whispered, "and why's he here?" Ash whimpered and burrowed closer to her chest. Atlas moved then, stepping forward, positioning himself squarely between Maggie and the door. He didn't growl. He didn't bare teeth. He simply stood, solid and unmoving, a quiet wall of muscle and intent. Travis scoffed. "You hiding behind a dog now?" Evan didn't rise to it. "You need to leave." Travis laughed, sharp and humorless. "You don't get to tell me anything. You think I don't know what's going on here?" He raised his voice deliberately. "You drag women up into the woods, playing hero? You think that looks good when the cops show up?" Lena stepped forward despite Evan's raised hand. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "Stop." Travis turned on her. "You walked out, took my money, took my mother-in-law." He gestured wildly. "This guy's got you brainwashed." "That's enough," Evan said. Travis leaned closer, breath sour. "Or what? You'll shoot me. Is that what you SEAL types do?" Before Evan could respond, the distant wail of sirens cut through the trees. Travis froze. "You called them," he snapped. "No," Evan said calmly. Someone else did. 2 patrol vehicles arrived minutes later. The officers stepped out carefully, hands resting near their belts but not drawn. The older one introduced himself as Deputy Harris, mid-40s, steady-eyed, his posture relaxed but authoritative. His partner, Officer Lane, younger and sharper, scanned the scene with quiet focus. "We got a welfare call," Harris said. "Mind telling us what's going on?" Travis launched into it immediately. Accusations, half-truths, a story full of heat but no weight. Evan listened without interrupting. When Harris turned to Lena, she took a breath and spoke clearly. "I'm here by choice. My mother is here by choice. We're not being held." Maggie nodded faintly, clutching Ash. "I don't want to go," she said. "It's warm here." Officer Lane crouched slightly to her level. "Ma'am, are you safe?" Maggie hesitated, then nodded again. "Yes." Evan handed Harris a folded packet. "Medical records from the clinic," he said. "They treated her for hypothermia." Harris skimmed the papers, then looked back at Travis. "Sir, we're going to need you to lower your voice." Travis bristled. "This is my family." Lena met his eyes. "Not anymore." Something in Travis snapped. "You ungrateful—" "That's enough," Harris said firmly. Atlas shifted his weight, still silent, still watching. Travis threw up his hands. "Fine, I'll go, but this isn't over." Harris shook his head. "It is for today. You're leaving." Travis stormed off the porch, boots slipping slightly on the thawing snow. The patrol cars followed him down the drive until the forest swallowed the sound. Silence returned slowly. Maggie's breathing eased. Ash lifted his head, then settled again. Atlas stepped back, returning to his place near the door as if nothing had happened. Evan closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, eyes shut. The truth had been spoken, quietly, without force, and it had been enough. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came in small permissions. The snow retreated from the porch first, then from the narrow path between the pines. The air softened. Light lingered longer in the evenings. The cabin began to breathe again. The loom worked most days now. Maggie no longer wove for hours at a time. She wove when she felt steady, when her hands remembered before her mind did. Some days she asked where she was. Other days she smiled at the cloth growing beneath her fingers and said, "This will keep someone warm." That was enough. Ash was never far. He slept beside her chair, followed her from room to room, and whimpered softly if she forgot him for more than a moment. His legs grew stronger, his ears lifted higher, his curiosity expanding with the world. Maggie called him her little anchor. When words drifted away, Ash remained. Atlas watched it all with quiet acceptance. He allowed Ash to curl against him by the fire, to climb clumsily over his paws, to steal his warmth without protest. At night, the 2 dogs slept side by side, one seasoned by years of discipline, the other just learning what safety felt like. Lena was the one who noticed the comments first. She had posted a short video online, no faces, no explanations. Just her mother's hands moving thread through the loom, the steady rhythm, Ash sleeping nearby, the sound of wood and fiber working together. "Someone wants to buy it," she said, disbelief flickering across her face as she showed Evan the screen. 1 order became 2, then 5. A woman from a nearby town stopped by with a bag of wool and a question. A neighbor offered to help fix the porch rail in exchange for a blanket. Word traveled the way it always did in small places, quietly, person to person. The cabin changed again. A work table replaced the unused dining set. Shelves filled with folded blankets and skeins of yarn. The loom stood at the center now, no longer tucked away. People came, not all at once, not loudly. They came with stories, with patience, with the understanding that some things take time. Maggie greeted them kindly, whether she remembered their names or not. "Sit," she would say. "You'll be warmer." Evan watched from the doorway more than once, struck by the ease of it. The way life had rearranged itself without asking his permission. He had planned to leave. The paperwork sat untouched on the desk where he had first placed it. Forms that once felt urgent, now strangely irrelevant. Each morning he meant to finish them. Each evening he found another reason not to. He repaired the fence along the clearing, helped a neighbor split firewood, fixed a sagging step at the clinic without being asked. Work had followed him home, the kind that didn't require orders or exits. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the cabin glowed warm from within, Evan sat on the porch steps. Atlas lay beside him, chin resting on his paws. Ash tumbled clumsily across the boards, tripped, then tried again. Maggie's laughter drifted through the open door. Evan closed his eyes. For years, home had been a place he survived away from. A memory too sharp to touch. A responsibility he had postponed until it almost disappeared. Now it was here, in the sound of a loom, in the weight of a puppy asleep on his boot, in the quiet decision to stay when no one asked him to. Lena joined him on the steps. "You don't have to," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "I know," Evan replied. She nodded. "Still glad you are." They sat in silence, watching the sky shift from blue to gold. Inside, Maggie folded a finished blanket with care. She ran her hand across it once, then twice, and smiled. "This one's good," she said. "Someone will need it." That night the dogs settled near the fire as they always did. Atlas stretched out fully. Ash curled into his side, small and warm and certain. Evan looked at them, then at the room around him, and felt something settle at last. He wasn't here because of duty. He was here because he had chosen to be. And that, he understood now, was what made a home. Some miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. They come quietly, the way warmth returns to a cold room, or the way a hand reaches out when someone is almost too tired to keep walking. In this story, no one was suddenly made whole. They were simply not left alone. And sometimes that is how God chooses to work, not by changing the storm, but by placing the right people under the same roof until the storm passes. Perhaps there is someone in your own life who needs a little warmth right now, a phone call you've been meaning to make, a neighbor you haven't seen in a while, a memory you've been avoiding because it hurts, but also holds love. You don't have to do anything grand. Small acts, done with care, are often the ones God uses most. If this story brought you comfort, consider sharing it with someone who might need a reminder that hope still lives in ordinary places. If you feel led, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Sometimes just being heard is part of the healing. And if these stories bring peace to your heart, you're welcome to subscribe and walk with us through more moments of quiet strength and grace. May God bless you, keep you warm in every season, and guide you gently through whatever road lies ahead.